you a Preptober update. And I've got some tea, so let's talk a little bit about the last week. Okay. I took some recordings during the week, which I'll share throughout the vlog when they're relevant. And I did come across some really amazing resources. And if this is your first time here, hi, my name is Nadia. I'm using this blog for Preptober and NaNoWriMo this year. I'm going to be writing high fantasy, which could be the wrong choice for Nano, due to the amount of world building that needs to go with that. So I'm trying to take advantage of Preptober. It's been an interesting week. Anyone who's been following me on the Nano forums, who's checked in there, I had a little bit of a wobble of whether or not what I've chosen is possible during the month of November, because one of the worst things about NaNoWriMo is if it's not fun and if you're stressed about getting your word count out, and if you don't feel ready to get the word count out, like, you can pants it and you can sit down and you can just, you know, type out lots of words, but I don't want to write off a cliff either, because I just don't have time for that. A little bit about me. I work in marketing. I write all the time. I use a lot of templates, obviously, because all writers do. I am not a creative writer. I do Nano for fun. All about the joy and the therapy of killing through writing. I was having a look at my novel and what I was doing, and it is not YA in any way, shape or form. I've been following the Nano prep and took a deep dive into my characters, which led me to using Artbreeder. And if you haven't used it before, it's really great for any kind of Dungeons and Dragons players or anyone who wants to have like a visual representation of a character that you're building out. I went in there and I played with it, and I'm gonna show you what I created. Now, Artbreeder is an interesting website. If you haven't heard of it before, I'm going to leave a link down below of the YouTube a YouTube link that I used to create the characters that you can see here. I also took the questionnaire sheet from NaNoWriMo and I put it into Dabble, and I answered it for each of my characters. I have two main characters, antagonist, and then supporting characters who won't have as much of a role, so they didn't need as much fleshing out, but there is a significant amount of world building, which led me to exploring the plot options in the NaNoWriMo blog. Now, I am religiously a save the cat beat sheet person. I find that has the quickest plot development for me. It always kind of brings out plot holes immediately as soon as I start working through that sheet. So I always try to do the plot and then outline using the beat sheet. I have both the Save the Cat screenwriter beat sheet and I have the Save the Cat writes a novel. They are both amazing books. If someone asked me, do I need both? I would say, well, there's different information in both, and I enjoyed both of them even though I'm not a screenwriter. So when I faltered and I was having this type of day, so I'm sitting down here for a minute because I'm having those moments, which I think is like just imposter syndrome, you know, when your entire body like freezes and it's like, what am I doing? Who do I think I am that I can write a book? And I'm like, this is one of those things that I think so many people struggle with. I mean, just because you write a book doesn't mean anyone ever has to read it, right? And I mean, ideally, yeah, of course, it would be great if things got published, right? But writing a book it's really long and hard. It's like a marathon. It's endurance, right? So every now and again I get these like waves of fear that is like, I want to say irrational fear, but there's a little bit of like there's rationale there, right? Yeah, it's hard. And I get to this point where, like, in Nano, when it's November, you keep writing, right? You're so busy and you're lost in your book that you just keep writing. But Preptober, I always think that if you start really early, you get time to freak out and worry too much about things. So I have to kind of stop. Does that happen to you? Is that something that happens? And if you're wondering how that all turned out, so am I. No, it turned out really well. Going through the plot questions with the beat sheet meant that I was focused on whether or not this novel would work in the space of time that I have. I work in the mornings and my afternoons are free, but I also take part in the 5 a.m. or 6 a.m. Writers Club on Twitter. So I'll do check-ins there when I'm creatively writing or writing for me or just having fun. My job is very intensive. I'm usually exhausted when the morning is finished because my brain has gone through so much context switching and writing in different forms in that time that when I take a break and I come back to do some creative writing, I'm often really tired. And I find that if you're writing in the evenings and you're tired, one of the best ways that I got back into my writing for myself was to listen to other authors. It didn't matter if it was something that I was listening to for the second or the third time. So I'll go to podcasts or other YouTubes and I'll just let them play. And just by listening to somebody else and drinking some tea, having a snack, will get my brain excited about writing, and then I'll start writing. So it's a little bit like tricking my brain into switching on and into that mode and getting excited about it. I also write to timers. So if there's something that I want to do, or if I'm looking at a plot outline, I will set a timer. And if it's not working in, like, say 45 minutes, I will walk away and I will call it done, because there's nothing worse than spending huge amounts of time that you can't get back. So one of the resources I found really useful this week was I got an email from Dabble, which is the software that I use for plotting and writing. And they are also having a write a novel in 2 months. And they have 4 writers, I think, who are also doing this. They are all published authors, I think, but I will leave the link to the podcast for that down below, and some of you may find that really useful as well. It was really good to listen to the different types of novels that they were writing. A lot of the questions I had anyway about how do you find time to write, your inspiration, what you're choosing for Nano. And it's really interesting to me how authors who have published many, many books are just like, yeah, this is fine. Like, I could eat Nano for breakfast. And then you have authors who are really excited to take part, who might be a little bit rusty. And then you've got people who are just like, yeah, this is my first Nano. I'm just taking part. It's really good to listen to lots of different backgrounds of people, lots of different approaches. And there are things that I like to remind myself in that this is your first draft. It can be your 0 draft. There's a famous quote by Terry Pratchett, which is, your first draft is just you telling yourself the story. And I have a feeling that when I'm writing, I may just throw the outline out the window. And that just may happen. But what I've done is very big for Nano. It's an expansive worlds, plural, which possibly is not the right choice for Nano. So what I want to do is break it down so that even if I don't finish a first draft by the end of Nano, I have the strong basics and also the writing schedule ingrained so that I could continue well past Nano. I'm starting to fear a little. And I'm like, well, is Nano better for a smaller novel? Where, not a smaller novel, because novel that has like a limited location settings, so your world building isn't as big, has limited character count. Like, I just, over this weekend, thanks to Book Talk, thank you Book Talk, read Hooked and Den of Vipers. No, I had not read the back before I read either of those. Den of Vipers is, you know, it was my first, did not finish, of 2022. And the reason for that is because I felt the novel was too long. So past chapter 55, I was like, I'm so done with this. But it was done because of the amount of erotica in the novel. It was like too much for me. And I had not read what Den of Vipers was before purchasing said book. I fully allowed Book Talk to introduce me. But what it did have was amazing strong characters, and it did have a plot, and it did have like Roxy is just, I laughed out loud for the first third of that book. I was laughing and I really enjoyed it. It was entertaining, and it also took place in a finite place, mostly in the apartment of the Den of Vipers. There was a few settings in the cities, but it was one place, right? It's not characters moving from one place to another place that happens in fantasy. And I was like, oh. And then when I read Hooked, also spicy novels. So I'm starting to see a trend from Book Talk here. It is it's not even a Peter Pan retelling, but it is based on Hook. It's, again, comes with a lot of trigger warnings. It is an interesting book. I finished it, I think, in just over a day. So it's not a very long book, but it made me seriously focus on characters and how, and location not being everything. That might be a better fit for the amount of time that you have for Nano. And then I went into the rabbit hole. And that is one thing about Nano Prep, that sometimes, you know, you live in your head too much and it can stop you from writing the thing, just writing. Like, there's a lot to be said for pasting, right? You just sit down and you write, and the energy and emotion and everything just pours right out on the page. I'm also really worried about writing around work, because there are some scenes that I know that I'm writing are difficult to write. They are emotional to write. And I'm strategically trying to write them on days where I'm not going to be working so that they don't take toll. But Nano is happening during my busiest work schedule as well. So I'm trying to get as much prep done as possible. How about you? How is your Nano going? Drop a link below. Tell me how it's going for you. Tell me if I'm crazy. And tell me if you've had any of these thoughts yourself. I'm going to go because it's actually getting really dark and it's going to downpour, rain and thunder probably. See you next week.